or 366. I am joining you on this Saturday afternoon to answer all of your questions related to history and social studies for the next hour. I'm History Hefner here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, and we have been doing these live streams for about 10, 11 months or so. I think I started them in June of last year. The channel's been going since February of 2023, or 2024. So we've been here just over a year. President's Day weekend as our birthday, and we've had a lot of fun and a lot of success here. And for the next hour or so, I will be doing what I do every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, both of those days, answering all of your questions related to social studies and history. I was not able to be here yesterday. I was really, really sick. With either food poisoning or stomach flu. I'm not sure which, but I'm doing a lot better. I'm able to eat some solid foods again and stuff like that, and drink and drink other things that are not water. But I'm not 100% better. I don't know if I can hold a full meal down, but hey, it's a good intermittent fasting weight loss program that I've been on this weekend. Apparently, Thursday night I started to feel really, really sick, and it just hit me really bad. And Thursday night I didn't get any sleep, basically just tossing and turning, waking up to feel better. I'll just let the innuendo stand. And then Friday I was doing a little bit better, able to do a little bit of the content for the channel, but I was just out of it. And today I'm actually starting to feel a lot better, so I don't know what that means or anything, but for the next hour or so I will be answering all of your questions related to history and social studies. And if I feel good enough and if everything's going well, maybe we'll do 2 hours and stretch it out, because I owe you guys an hour of Q&A because I was sick on Friday. But welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where we bring you history in a friendly, neighborly manner. I'm History Hefner with my accustomed smoking jacket, and I'm not at my usual spot because I am charging my very low battery phone right now. So thank you for joining us here at the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. I already see Harsinet, my wonderful moderator, holding down the chat. Hars, if you can put the social medias, Patreon and Substack in the chat, I would really appreciate that and everything. We also have a live stream lecture, which I'll probably supplement with a Q&A tomorrow afternoon, so all of that great stuff. So anyways, I'm going to look through the chat. Great to see everybody. Let me see. Timothy is asking history of the Philly cheesesteak sandwich, and Hars was asking about the history of pizza. I don't know the history of the Philly cheesesteak sandwich. Most American foods, Timothy, are not technically American. I mean, pizza is Italian. Hot dogs are based on wieners, which are German. Brats and things like that, they're a derivative of those things, although they're better quality. Steak is actually originally French. French fries are Belgian, although some people would joke that they're made in Greece, if you know what I mean. There's different types of food from all over the world that are very popular in America. Hamburgers, those are not American. They're actually technically from other countries. You know what are American? Burritos. They were invented in California, believe it or not. Pizza comes from an Italian, is a derivative of an Italian food that is pizzaiola, which was reinvented in an American way. You have large numbers of German, Italian, French, English immigrants to the United States who obviously bring their culinary traditions with them, which includes pasta, spaghetti and meatballs, pizza, things like that, hamburgers, hot dogs. Most of the food comes from the fact that America has a rich ethnic and immigration history that allows a lot of the food that is made in America to be, that's quintessentially American, to be immigrant food. And be that burritos, or be that French fries, or be that hamburgers, those are all testaments to the large and rich history of America and its culinary and its immigration with its various culinary influences. So I don't know about the Philly cheesesteak itself. I don't know, but it sounds really good, and I'd want one right now if my stomach wasn't so punk. So thank you for asking about food when you just found out I had food poisoning and I'm barely recovering. Shipping off to Marine. Good luck, Charles. 7, I know a lot about history. W, thank you for joining us. Henry, great to see you. Oh, world history? I do world history. You taught world history. I think you might have misspelled that, but that's really cool. Thank you for joining us, 7. Thank you, Hars. Enjoy your pizza. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel player, and I'm History Hefner, answering all your questions about history and social studies. Lasagna is an Italian dish. It's a multi-layered Italian dish using ricotta, mozzarella, and some other cheeses as well. Cody, good to see you. I am not going to play that right now. In fact, I already believe that there has been a World War III, so I don't need to. Poland. I love Polish history. I love Polish society. King Jan Sobieski, Jan III, who basically saved Central Europe from the Ottomans by relieving the siege at Vienna in 1683 on September 11th, which is why that date has had such market interest for radical Muslims who are trying to avenge what they believe is Crusader and Christian aggression against Islam. Yes, Steve, I'm a great whisperer, and I also use this gap to get my credit cards paid. Shalom, thank you for joining us from Israel. Pizza is Sicilian. Some of it is. There's different types of pizzaiolas in different types of Italy, and different areas of Italy called paese have different types of foods. Just like the English, the Scottish, and the Irish have different types of foods. Vladimir, hello, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. The offender, there really isn't that much. A chop suey, again, Chinese food is obviously Chinese, but a lot of the Chinese food that you eat here in the United States, be it from Panda Express or from even more authentic Chinese culinary venues, are actually American-made renditions of Chinese dishes that are not as common in China as they are here in the United States. But chop suey was invented in San Francisco. The Chinese do not like chop suey. That's the common joke. And I've never had Australian food. I imagine it's quite interesting. Lewandowski baby is the only Polish I know. Okay. So what are okay. I'm trying to answer the chat as quickly as I can, so it's going to take a little bit. So just bear with me. I'm just scrolling through, seeing what everyone's saying. If you don't get your question answered right away, I will do my honest best. Who invented golf? I'm not sure exactly who invented golf. I think the Scottish. It's either the Scottish or the Germans. Hi, Brian. Thank you for joining us. Harry's saying, do you think with Donald Trump destroying the U.S. world relations and China offering loans and infrastructure projects, do you think China will rise as a superpower soon to challenge the U.S.? It already has been on the rise. If anything, they're just redirecting their ventures to continue that process now that Trump has put impediments in their way via tariffs. China's already been on that way up and has already been increasing their influence and power. And right now it's a chess game between them and the U.S. Who invented dogs? I don't know exactly how dogs became domesticated, but I believe that people have been domesticating canines for 7,000 years, as long as there's been a recorded history, at least. Let me see here. Robespierre is saying, oh, a serious stream. Most streams are absolute bonkers. Not sure you're going to like it here. I do it all the time. I do it every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I get all sorts of trolls and stuff like that, but I just enjoy having people here to ask legitimate questions about history and social studies, and them liking and subscribing helps them become friendly neighborhood historians, and we are nearly 7,400 strong, so I really appreciate all the support and all of that. Timothy Jehoshaphat, isn't that a biblical character? I don't know what Tartaria is, so you'd have to remind me what that is, Prop. Is Atlantis real? So Atlantis has always been a fantasy. It goes back to ancient Greek mythology, and Greek philosophers tended to entertain the idea of it existing. It was basically this question of what exists to the west of where their civilization was, and they all knew about the Straits of Gibraltar. They called it the Pillars of Hercules, and they wondered if there was a large continent out there that had some sort of relationship to their Greek civilization that would have been Atlantis, that was punished by the gods for their arrogance. So it's a mythology that has a story behind it that's supposed to be a proverb and a lesson in honesty and moral good behavior, basically. Yes, a proper question will do. Yes, offender. The Mughal Empire is the Indian Empire, a Muslim Indian empire that was founded by a descendant of Genghis Khan. I believe Abu Bakr was his name. And they were an extremely powerful Indian empire, the first one to control basically all of the Indian subcontinent under the likes of their great rulers like Akbar the Great and Shah Jahan, who built the Taj Mahal as a memorial to his wife. The empire eventually started to decline in the 17th and 18th centuries as different Indian subgroups thwarted their power and only paid lip service to the Mughal emperor. Eventually, the British, French, and Dutch started to undermine India's sovereignty, the Indian subcontinent and its sovereignty, until eventually the Mughal Empire collapsed as India was absorbed into the British Empire in the 1850s. And yes, make sure to follow me on X, Instagram, and Facebook, as Hars has put those social media handles in the chat. You can get more updates and information there. Thank you very much, Hars, for doing that and for holding down the chat. Name 3 battles in the Mexican-American War. Veracruz, no, not Veracruz. Buena Vista, Mexico City, and I believe there was one in California. I'm trying to think of it. I think Santa Fe was a battle too. There was one right there with right on the border between India and between Texas and Mexico, and that's how the war actually got started. Kashmir belongs to who? Kashmir Oh boy. Well, this is interesting because India and Pakistan, which were divided from each other in the 1940s, if you go to any sort of medieval or early modern map or geography or historical testament, there was no India and there was no Pakistan. It was Hindustan, the land of the Hindus, which eventually came under the influence of the Muslims. And the Mughal Empire that I just mentioned controlled all of India and all of Pakistan and all of Bangladesh, or most of it for the most part. And Pakistan and Kashmir was obviously a part of that. In 1947, the British ended their imperial occupation of India, deciding to let Pakistan go free, and that was be the land of the Muslims, while India would remain the land of the Hindus, and the land that was right between them has been disputed ever since, and that has been the land of Kashmir. That was in 1947 when the British divided them based on religious affiliation, with the Pakistanis being a majority Muslim area and with India being a majority Hindu area, to keep the Muslims and the Hindus from fighting each other as they had for centuries, something that the Mughal Empire had been skillfully able to avoid by basically pandering to the Hindus while having Muslims in power. So who does Kashmir belong to? It's a difficult thing to say, but historically there was no Pakistan, there was no Kashmir, and there was no India. It was all part of Hindustan and the Mughal Empire that eventually was taken over by the British, and the British then tried to conquer Afghanistan to turn it into a buffer state with Persia that was heavily influenced by the Russians in the 19th century. And eventually in 1947, they decided to free India and Pakistan, but divide them because of their religious differences. I don't know if that's true, Will, but that sounds like it's fun. Who do you think is an older race, African albinos or Caucasians? Well, technically, one of the earliest people groups to ever exist came from Africa. But I don't know about African albinos. I would assume they are later, but I'm ready to be surprised. What's going on with India and Pakistan? Will there be a war? There has always been tensions between India and Pakistan, but the fighting and contention over Kashmir has been a bigger issue recently, and with Hamid Naradi as the Prime Minister of India, with absolutely no affinity for the Pakistanis, and with such great disdain for the Pakistanis that he wants to rename India because the Indus River civilization, which India is based in, is an affront to him because the Indus River is in Pakistan. Basically, there could easily be war between those countries. That land has been highly contested. Who won in the war between Australia and the kangaroos? I believe the kangaroos let the Australians win. What about everyone claiming Israel has been on Canaan since 3000 BCE and Palestine is just 600 AD? Well, the truth of the matter is Palestine did not exist in 600 AD. Palestine existed as early as 138 when the Romans, under the Emperor Hadrian, renamed the land, naming it after an ancient rival of the Israelites, the Philistines, and they took over the land and renamed it Palestina, and renamed Jerusalem Area Capitolina, and eventually the Roman Empire fell or was dissolved into the Eastern Byzantine Roman Empire, which was a Christian empire that controlled that land in the 7th century when Islam came out of the Arabian Peninsula and conquered it under the Rashidun Caliphate, I think in 636. And they erected the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque to basically be their symbols of control over Jerusalem. They believe that to be a holy site where Muhammad was supposedly taken to heaven by Allah. I believe it's Muhammad. And so that is the claim there. The Palestinian people did not necessarily exist in it. That land was conquered by Arab invaders. And the Canaanites, the Israelites, based on their own history and their own religious beliefs, have not been in that land since 3000 BC. It is much more likely that at the maximum, they've been there for about 3,500 years. So, just some background there. Dr. Utesh, well, you get down the fiddle and you get down the bow. Okay, then thanks for singing. Do you think Britain should have been as worried as it was when facing Russia in the Great Game, considering its military ineptitude when it went to war with Japan in the Russo-Jap War? Harry, Russia was extraordinarily powerful, has a lot of resources and a lot of manpower, and of course a lot of land, and they're always willing to use that, and you never fight an invasive war against the Russians. You always fight a defensive war against them, and you can win. The Russo-Japanese War was a defensive war, for the most part, by the Japanese, as the Russian incursions into Manchuria really worried Japan after it had conquered Korea. So the truth of the matter is, Harry, that Russia is Japan. The British had every reason to worry about Russia. What made Russia look really weak was their loss in the Crimean War. Rodolfo, thank you for joining us. Timmy, I don't know what the question mark's for. Okay, so then, your view on the relatively ancient, recent archaeological hypotheses and LIDAR discoveries of earthwork sites in the Amazon basin. Actually, Robespierre, I don't know about that. I haven't read much about that, so I can't answer you. I'm not going to give you an answer about something I don't know. I'm learning about the Mexican-American War myself. Any tips? Yeah, understand the basic principle of the Mexican-American War that I think everyone forgets is that the United States conquered all of Mexico, then gave half of it back to the Mexicans, and then paid for the land that they had conquered. And that basically it was part of fulfilling manifest destiny and completing sea to shining sea. Mexico had been an unstable republic for quite some time, which had been taken advantage of by strongmen like Santa Anna de Lopez, who had already seen and dealt with the Americans in the Texas Revolution. So understand that this war was almost inevitable after the Texas Revolution in the 1830s, Hars. Thank you, God's Mission. I appreciate that in the spirits it's given. Are you Indian? No, I am not Indian. I think you can probably tell by my pigmentation and facial features I am not Indian. I love Indian society, culture, history, and yes, food, even though a lot of Americans don't for some reason, and I really appreciate learning more about it. So I know, and just because you aren't of one race, background, or even continental association doesn't mean you can't know a lot about a certain area. What do you know about Suriname? You mean the country of Suriname? Not much. Because of Clement Attlee, the idiot, had lost us India. What an absolute disgrace. Well, to be fair, that was after Churchill starved 3 million Indians, so something people don't like to talk about with Churchill, and I absolutely love Churchill, is that Churchill's diversion of resources during World War III, which you call World War II, caused the deaths of about 3 million Indian and Pakistani people. Protester, I don't know what you're saying there. Finally, someone honest enough to acknowledge the Roman origin of Palestine. Yes, the term Palestine comes from comes from Herodotus, the first historian, who basically collected terms and decided on the name as an adjudication based on the Philistina region that was conquered by the Sea Peoples in the 10th century BC. Why did the Roman Empire rename the land Israel to Palestine? To insult the Jews, basically. Thank you for joining us from Oz. Always a pleasure, Striker. It's Britain's fault for not a one-state solution. They are making it worse. All of happening is an attack to our sovereignty. Britain actually did offer, as Harry will tell you, Britain basically did offer a two-state solution. The Arabs would never accept, the Palestinian groups there never accepted any sort of deal that would allow the Israelis to have their own state, and so because of that, they were dispossessed in the Arab-Israeli War in 1948. Interestingly enough, this is after many of the Arabs in Palestine had been commiserate with the Nazi regime and turning over Jews. Hitler was closely associated with the Grand Mufti of Palestine and was doing everything he could to get Mizrahim Jews from the Middle East expelled to Germany where they could be killed. And soon after that, there were many deals that were on the table, and Ben Gurion, the first president of Israel, or the first prime minister of Israel, Chaim Weizmann was the first president of Israel, but Ben Gurion, who was a leader of a covert militaristic operation that could be easily labeled a terrorist organization based on how you see it, who was trying to do everything he could to usurp the Arabs there, did offer them an agreement at first to give 87% of the land, not of the land they wanted, but 87% of the land they wanted to the Palestinians. They refused the deal, or the Arabs. They weren't technically Palestinians at that time, and that is a huge reason why that land has remained in such distress ever since then. It's basically a Rube Goldberg machine. If they did this, then they did that. Well, they started this, and then they started that, and it's finger pointing all the way around, and it's never going to end until there's some attempt at coexistence or one of the groups gets the hell out of there. Okay, Harry's saying Russia was a backwater and it wasn't industrialized. We had the greatest empire the world had ever seen. We were the most industrialized nation in the world, and we had the Royal Navy. Absolutely, Britain was better than Russia in the 19th century, Harry, but the truth of the matter is that the Russians had just beaten Napoleon. The British never would have beaten Napoleon had it not been for the Russians and Alexander I. So Russia rested on its laurels of beating Napoleon until the Crimean War, so the British were very terrified of them. Tsar Paul I Alexander's father had indicated that he was interested in seizing India and had almost allied with Napoleon, and so that fear had gotten the British on their high heels about losing India. The Russians also had made terrific gains again in the Balkans and in the Transcaucasus regions against their Ottoman adversaries, who were their biggest foe. And as the Ottoman Empire was collapsing, there was a power vacuum emerging in South Central Asia. Palestine has apartheid due to no Jews live in it. That's not necessarily an apartheid. I understand the arguments for it being an apartheid state. What's interesting is to look at Jordan and Lebanon and how they treat the Palestinians, because the Palestinians are not just segregated against and discriminated against in Israel, in the West Bank. There's other areas too. The truth of the matter is that modern money is already going the way of the dodo bird because of the rise of fiat currency, as well as the rise of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and the fact that no money is supported in this world by actual gold and silver shows that specious cash is on its way out. So good question, Prop. Henry Rice, the USS Maine was a false flag. So the USS Maine was blown up in 1898. Some tests have actually indicated that the Spanish did blow it up, but it was sent to Havana to maintain U.S. interests, and then it blew up probably from an engine room explosion and failure of the boiler room. But it was a perfect excuse by the yellow journalists and the American media to pit Spain as their enemy and cause the United States to go to war with Spain, the Spanish-American War, aka the Splendid Little War, which America won, which gave them Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, and got Cuba its independence from the Spanish. Thank you, Robespierre. I appreciate it. Make sure to like and subscribe. Jeffrey, the only conclusion that I can gather from this information is your, thanks. Appreciate that. Hello, Fire, thank you for joining us. What's your question? Thank you, Sean, I really appreciate that. And you're very intelligent for pointing that out. Please check it out. Check out the long-form content I have. It usually drops every Friday and Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I did not drop a video this Friday because I was horrifyingly sick, but I'm a lot better now, so expect that long-form video tomorrow by 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I am doing a video on a very sensitive but important topic, the Armenian Genocide, which was just memorialized on April 24th. April 24th was the memorialization in Israel of the Holocaust, and it is also the memorialization of the Armenian Genocide, so an extremely important historical event just passed, which for all the great things I love about Turkey is one thing that I admire. They have refused to acknowledge that the Ottoman Empire committed the Armenian Genocide in the 1910s, killing about 1 million people. The first major genocide of dozens to come in the 20th century. The 20th century was full of unspeakable acts of violence and terrorism, and it's interesting. Human society advanced technologically, economically, societally, but apparently not morally. How many Native Americans were killed since the Europeans colonized North America? Hazma, the truth of the matter is the vast majority of Native Americans who died on the North American continent died from disease and exposure, which was usually unintentionally inflicted in their interactions with Europeans, usually through trade or other mechanisms that were not necessarily violent. Several million were killed in the series of wars that were fought between the United States, the British, the French, and the Spanish as the centuries went on. Many more were imprisoned, oppressed, and other unspeakable things were done to men and women, and many died in horrible condition. Let me see here. Rehus Ique. I don't know what you mean there, Jeffrey. Rodolfo, Palestine should sue the Italians. Why should they sue the Italians? Harry saying, and Churchill had asked the U.S. President FDR to send food to Bengal. FDR said he couldn't, and same as the Canadians, Australians, and Kiwis. I absolutely believe it. I don't like FDR either, but that's on Churchill. That one falls on Churchill. That food should have been provided to the Indians. What about the Spanish Armada? So the Spanish Armada, Timothy, was 1588, basically under the blessing of the Pope, the Spanish King Philip II, trying to reconquer England from his former sister-in-law, Elizabeth I, who was a Protestant, sent a Catholic armada full of ships to destroy, much larger than the English could muster, to conquer England. The Armada ran into trouble because the English ships were a lot faster and used fire ships to explode Spanish ships, and basically that, compiled with a series of storms, destroyed the Armada and saved the English from a Spanish invasion. Why did even Greeks were accused of Armenian genocide? I don't know about that. The Greeks and the Turks fought plenty of wars against each other. I don't see that they would be considered the same. Say your question. You don't need to keep... Yes, thank you. Can I ask you something? Do you hate illegal aliens like Mexicans, Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis? I don't hate anyone, especially, and I particularly love people who like and subscribe. I'm not here to talk about political opinions or political ideology unless it relates to something I can find historical. So I will talk about modern politics only as a vehicle to talk about the history and the geopolitics associated with them because they are all connected. I don't hate anyone who seeks a better life for themselves. Their means may not always be the best, but they are doing what they can to make their lives better. Didn't Albert Einstein get offered the premiership of Israel? He did, and he turned it down because he knew it would be an absolute mess. I don't know what Bahrain is. The country Bahrain? And yes, like Kevin is saying, like the live, subscribe to more. Good to see you as always. Let me see here. In history, do you just like to know facts about wars, or do you like to know how the wars worked, like the battles? I like to do both. The more involved I am in the history, the more I will learn about the battles. If anyone has a problem, blame Britain, the US, or France. Harry, that's a common thing to do, especially nowadays. I don't always do that. I am perfectly capable of blaming other people for their problems, but I'm not going to blame. But when blame is deserved from me, believe me, blame someone gets. Horatio Nelson was Napoleon's father. I don't think that's true. KT, right now I am reading your chat. Russia only won because its good friend called the winter. Yes, but the Russians know how to capitalize on the winter, and scorched earth worked very well. Basically, the Russians kept Napoleon in Russia just long enough to be able to decimate his army and destroy them. I believe it was the Palestinians who attacked first in 1948, and then because of the attack, they were dispossessed from the lands that they did held. Hundreds of thousands of them were forced to move. Tons of their towns were renamed. Meanwhile, 2 million Jews were exiled from all of the other Arab countries, as none of them agreed to acknowledge Israel's right to exist. And until 1979, it remained that way, Egypt being the first Middle Eastern country, if you want to call it that, to acknowledge Israel's right to exist. The workings of the Abraham Accords mean that Saudi Arabia may be the next one. If that falls, the largest Sunni nation in the Middle East, acknowledging Israel's right to exist, Iran will be in huge trouble, as will Hamas. Yes, that's true, Harry. Napoleon wasn't actually that short. I don't know how short Lord Nelson was, but most people, based on nutrition, were a lot shorter back then anyways, but Napoleon was about 5'6", which was average male height at that time. I have a real bullet from the Revolutionary War at the Battle of Yorktown. Raj, that must be really cool. I would love to see that sometime. You should email me at friendlyneighborhoodhistory@gmail.com and send me a picture of that because I would love to see that. Thank you so much. Why should Palestine blame the Greeks? Thanks, Jeffrey. I appreciate that. Once you insult my facial features and compare them to the backside of, I believe that was a rhinoceros, it's always nice to know that you enjoy me talking about history. But like and subscribe to make all things good. Did the Philistines back then while sailing coming towards falling Canaanite? The Philistines were a group. There isn't one Philistines. There was a group of people called the Sea Peoples. They were from Greece and several different islands in the Mediterranean who settled in different areas around Anatolia, Grecian islands, and they even tried to attack Egypt and failed. But they also settled along the western coast of the Levant, interestingly enough, near where Gaza is today, and they formed what were called the Philistines, and they were the major enemy and the ancient enemy of the Israelites if you read the Hebrew scriptures. That is why the Romans renamed it Palestine, to insult the Jews who they had expelled from the region. Interesting that all the questions are about modern history of ancient Judea thrown in. What's your actual research area? I mean, if you listen to me and Harry and our exchanges about Russia and Britain in the 19th century, my master's thesis was on the Great Game. So I've written about it extensively about. I'm a Russian historian, European historian, but I try to learn as much about any history as I can. And I talked about the Mughals, and I talked about the Romans and the Greeks. I always get questions about that, but there's always people who want to come in and talk about Israel and Palestine or Trump. And so rather than tell them they're in the wrong live stream, I try to listen to what they have to say and see what I can garner politically and historically from that. What's with the huge gap in your teeth? It's how I pay my credit cards. And if you want it to go away, like and subscribe so I can afford the Invisaligns to get my teeth fixed. If we want to solve energy conflict, we need to delete only one religion, Islam. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Yes, that's true, Dublin. They were exposed to that. Yellow fever, scarlet fever, all the different colored fevers. Michael, good to see you as always. Fought the yellow fever, placed on blankets. That happened. There was only about 1 or 2 instances of that happening. It was not an intentional thing to destroy natives. The Europeans struggled with those diseases themselves and died all the time from them as well. Yes, and Islam is a very beautiful religion. I respect all the religions of the world here on this channel. I tell the truth about all the religions here on this channel, and I've done videos on long form videos on the history of Islam, on Judaism, and on Christianity. Go check those out. I think you'll find them quite interesting, especially my most recent one about the history of Easter. And yes, some Armada ships did run amok and shipwreck off the coast of Ireland. Do you believe in Renaissance reborn of Europe and it again will be great world power? I mean, Europe may need that. Their birth rates are declining, their economic progress is declining, their political stability is declining, and they continue to have this cultural battle of trying to retain their distinct identity with an influx of immigrants who many of their people do not want and are very discriminatory against. So that's a huge issue right now, Prop. Who knows what kind of a renaissance Europe necessarily needs, but it is a continent in decline. Compare where Europe was in 1925 to where it is in 2025. Churchill couldn't help. He was fighting a world war, needed to feed his army and navy and air force, and this so-called allies couldn't be bothered to help people in India. No. Churchill was... Why should the United States give food to people in India who are a colony of the British at the time? The British were responsible for feeding the Indians because the Indians gave them the supplies and the manpower they needed to fight the war. I can't understand what makes a man hate another man. Help me understand. Vengeance, anger, all of these things, but if you don't know the man personally, dehumanization. Propaganda is an extremely good weapon at dehumanizing your enemy, because if you can dehumanize him, you can make yourself kill him. You can't kill someone who you don't know without dehumanizing them or making them responsible for all sorts of horrifying atrocities. So if you ever look at World War I propaganda, there's positive propaganda that is made to make your side look great and make it look good to fight for your side or donate or ration your food for your side. And then there is antagonistic propaganda where you libel and demonize and dehumanize racially, ethnically, culturally, your enemy, basically making them the worst possible person on the world, because once you dehumanize anyone, it is much easier to kill them. Just like it's much easier to kill chickens and eat them than it is to kill humans and eat them, obviously. But interesting question, Henry. That's going into philosophy almost, but it obviously is the engine of history, unfortunately, and that being war. Why has Morocco not existed for national bank, but it's 100 times richer than Luxembourg? It's all the population there it's the population there that's made it extraordinarily wealthy. How many countries in the world? 198 was my last count. Linda, I say hi back. Hamas is indeed quite evil. And of course, the argument coming from many Palestinians and many would be that the Israelis and the IDF are just as evil. Do you think America, and that's because, actually, Timothy, I'll go into more or not Timothy, who said that? Jeeper, I'll go into more detail on that. That's because, at the end of the day, most of the Palestinians and many of those in the Arab world see Israel as an extension of U.S. and Western imperialism, and they see the British Army, the American Army, the Israeli Defense Force, whatever it might be, as nothing better than a glorified terrorist organization that will only oppress them. And if you look at what the United States did in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's hard to argue against that sometimes. Are the Redcoats indeed coming? We've already passed the anniversary of the American Revolution. Do you think America's decolonization policy was good? I agree with the colonization, but the way the U.S. and others went about it was a total disgrace and caused more problems. I don't know. I think that the United States never really needed to decolonize that much, except the Philippines, which they rancorously held on to through horrifying actions in the early 1900s. Look at the story of Emilio Aguinaldo and how he suffered because of the Spanish and then, yes, the Americans. I don't think the United States has had to decolonize quite the way the Europeans have. They never had the influence and reach. Their influence, as I wrote in my Substack article today, which you guys should definitely check out, has much more to do with economic and political hegemonic influence in places like Japan after World War II, or obviously Western Europe with the formation of NATO. So, yeah, I don't think the United States decolonization. I think what you have a problem with is them putting pressure on the Europeans to decolonize in Africa, which led to humiliating efforts. Basically, the United States was happy with decolonizing areas of Africa and South America, as long as they would not become communist. When they became communist, the United States moved in to do everything they could to get rid of communist dictators like Lumumba in Congo. Was Hillary the English cartoonist who seems to have given us the Napoleon in short myth? Yes. Basically, the English used political cartoons, which they basically invented at that time, to mock Napoleon and make him look shorter than he was, because they wanted to make him feel small because he was their enemy. Let me see here. Gilray, yes. You have a decorate? I am the friendly... You have a doctorate? No, I have a master's degree in history, so you're talking to a bona fide historian. I'm History Hefner, and this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. I don't share my personal identity, and I keep it on the down low where exactly I am, who I am, because I'm just bringing you the history. The Hakuna, this live stream is about history. You can ask me anything you'd like related to history or social studies. My blog, my Substack, is about historical, cultural, geopolitical issues, all of that stuff. Joe Mack, great to see you. I'm doing much better. I hope you are too. And yes, that's true, Samuel. Propaganda is definitely not in decline, still in very much in use today. I mean, Uncle Sam is propaganda. Did the USA guarantee Ukraine it would protect Ukraine from Russia if Ukraine got rid of their nuclear weapons? I think so, Steve, but I also think the truth of the matter is there's agreements that have been made by word of mouth, such as the agreement to stop NATO expansion. There is a constant fear that Russia would try to retake Ukraine and these lands, and obviously they're trying to do that. Can the current army of Aruba in present day defeat all of the Holy Roman Empire in its prime? Interesting question. Their modern military against the army of the Holy Roman Empire? Probably. I mean, you have the British and very small forces being able to overrun large numbers of Aboriginal and military tribes with more primitive technology in Africa. Basically, 100 Brits able to kill 1,000 Africans. So when you have a technological advantage, you have everything. Which podcasts interest you and add to your wealth of knowledge or round out your curiosity? Let's see here. I'll listen to Jordan Peterson sometimes for psychological stuff. Don't always agree with his perspectives, to be sure. History Unplugged is really good if I'm doing history. The Russian History Podcast is good. I forget the name of the guy who does that. He's really good. I like listening to true crime stuff sometimes, but basically, I've got a few history podcasts that I keep in my back pocket. Yes, that's true, Joe Mack. The incursions in the West Bank also have to stop. That is absolutely unnecessary. The settlements, the idea by many of the ultra-Orthodox in Israel is that they have a right to all of the land and not just the land of the Palestinians. And if the Palestinians are going to try to chip away at them, they will chip away at the Palestinians. England is not in decline, hence why it left Europe. As for illegal immigration, that's how under control. However, the media says opposite, bit like the States. Yes, Samuel, the truth of the matter is the British... This is a huge thing for me in the psychology of the British, because I am an Anglophile and I love English and British history. I'm wearing a smoking jacket, which is inspired by the British who invented them in the 19th century when they would bring back Turkish tobacco from the Crimean War, where they helped the Ottoman Turks defeat the Russians. And they would put this on and smoke in the evenings to protect their street clothes from getting dirty and full of smoke smell and ash. So I'm obviously an Anglophile, but the truth of the matter is that most of the Europeans, that Great Britain doesn't want to be associated with most of the rest of the European countries. This has been an on-off thing. How involved is Great Britain, the story, and the culture of Europe? And it's kind of an on-off button that the British press back and forth. During the Napoleonic times, they were extremely involved, and after the Napoleonic times, they just wanted to use their navy to go colonizing. Being an island detached from the actual mainland continent has allowed Britain to get away with things that the rest of the Europeans won't, and Brexit is just the latest in a long list of that. Marvin, communists are much worse than any other group in this world. Really? Worse than Nazis? Worse than radical Islamic terrorists? I would tend to agree, but it's not necessarily a runaway. You can ask me anything you want, Benjamin, even something controversial. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for asking your questions. And if you guys are enjoying my answers and what I'm talking about, consider liking and subscribing and becoming a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as doing that. Yes, the European community is different. You are right, Samuel. Harry is saying, I know it had a lot to do with the USSR, but the way the US went around forcing France and Britain to decolonize made it worse. I would agree with you, and I think the US did not handle Third World foreign relations well at all, and that's why a lot of those countries absolutely hate the United States, and part of the reason there is a glut of illegal immigrants headed to the United States from South and Central America has to do with things that were put in play during the Cold War that led to destabilized governments, and also an embrace of socialism, which has not helped a lot of countries like Colombia, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Could the Bangladesh Empire utilized tax to invade the Munikins? Don't know about that. Not sure. Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Canada all went under a normal decolonization process are successful today. Yes, that's true. There needs to be the post-colonial ties also are stronger that the Africans do not want and the Central Americans do not want with their European forebearers, the European colonizers. If South Korea is a superpower, it should be stronger than North Korea, but there's a lot of percentage that can make North Korea won the war. Well, the truth of the matter is that North Korea has much more of a militaristic, they spend very little time focused on actually taking care of their own people. They're a much more militaristic, nationalistic country that is far less focused on international relations and far more focused on its own political advantages and its military supremacy and its dictatorship and preserving that dictatorship. And so North Korea would definitely win in a fist fight with South Korea. South Korea continues to bank on Japan, who continues to bank on the United States for support if the ceasefire should cease and North Korea invade the South. Hello, thank you for joining us from Russia. What do you think about U.S. aid and their support to Russian politicians and bloggers? The U.S. seems to be very, very bent, and has been bent on the last 10 years, of getting rid of Vladimir Putin and supporting people who would do anything to get rid of him, such as Alexei Navalny. Right now, obviously, if Russia does not stop the war in Ukraine, there could be serious repercussions. Even President Trump is coming around to that position. How did the Jews leave Israel with bronze skin and woolly hair and return as white people? Well, Benjamin, they didn't. Well, kind of. There's different types of Jews. One of the groups is the Ashkenazi Jews, which are Jews that settled in Europe, and obviously intermarrying and living amongst Europeans, they develop certain physical characteristics that are more European. Those are the vast majority of Jews who are alive today are Ashkenazi Jews. The vast majority of Jews in the United States are Ashkenazi Jews. But for 2,500 years, there have been Persian Jews, the Mizrahim they are called, who have lived in the land of Persia. This is where the story of Queen Esther from the Bible comes from, and they continue to live, and many of them left Persia or Iran when the Shah fell and came to the United States, and some of them have gone back to the old Holy Land. Indeed, many Jews from Israel, there are not just Ashkenazi Jews in Israel. Many of the Jews in Israel are not Ashkenazi Jews. There are many different types of Jews with many different types of physical characteristics, and when your land is taken away from you and you are forced to live in different areas, you obviously develop different physical characteristics of those areas as the centuries go on, especially if you intermingle with the local populations. So, Indica, I appreciate that. I hope you're referring to me. Harry, I'd just like to point out we have more immigration since we left the European Union because the way we went around. Yeah, that's true. You guys did not handle that well. Neither, and I really thought Theresa May deserved another chance, and I do not like Bojo. So there you go. I am pro-Brexit. I am pro not being in the European Union, but the way we went about it was completely stupid. It was definitely bungled by the Conservatives, and that's why they don't have power anymore. 2025, UK is out of the European Union, but not the European community. Yes, that's true, Samuel. Wasn't Palestine mean spit at Jews, which is making me mad, and imagine them hiding in the name of Islam, which is a peaceful religion, now a politician religion. So there's different things to say. Obviously, a large amount of the Islamic practice in the Middle East is not peaceful at all, despite the fact that Islam, the second largest religion in the world, is overwhelmingly peaceful. That peace is retained to other areas where there's a large Muslim population, such as in Indonesia, not nearly as much as the case in Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, or Israel. Is it unethical to eat bananas and chocolate? No. Professor, Venezuela was the richest country in South America until Hugo Chavez came around. Yes. The kleptocracy of the socialist policy and the socialist policies of Hugo Chavez totally deflowered that country, and then it got even worse under Nicolas Maduro, who obviously stole his election to retain power in 2024. Conservatives must win in Canada Monday, or else Canada will essentially destroy itself. Well, you've got Mark Carney, who seems to be a lot more competent than, what's his name? I'm forgetting his name because he doesn't matter anymore, and he never really did. Trudeau. So we'll see. Carney seems to have a lot of support around him and seems to be a moderate figure who's become very well liked in the Western world. So, Russian history then. Any thoughts on the Russian Empire's activities in the Caucasus? Did the 19th century czars pit the Caucasian ethnic groups against each other as much as Stalin seems to have done? Yes, they did, and the main reason for doing that was taking that land away from the Ottomans and establishing their own imperial presence there. That's why they seized Armenia, what is now Azerbaijan, and Georgia. And obviously, Stalin himself came from Georgia, and basically, the Soviets, when they first came to power, they were called the Bolsheviks, the Red Russians, and they did everything they could to usurp and spread communism into the Transcaucasus regions, such as Georgia and Armenia. They also tried to spread it into Poland and basically got their rears handed to them in a war against Field Marshal Józef Pilsudski. Look him up. He has the greatest mustache in history, in my opinion. And basically, the Soviets were hell-bent on spreading communism as much as they could, and they did what they could to spread it into the Transcaucasus regions, and they were successful there. But the Russians imperialistically have been doing the same thing to undermine and destroy the Ottomans in the 19th century. Why are Americans so anti-socialist? Because for them, socialism means communism. Yes, Robespierre, I believe it will. Prop, how Argentina managed to be one of the richest countries 100 years ago and how they lost everything. They've lost everything, and now they're trying to come back, trying a completely new way, shifting from left-wing policies to more right-wing policies under the first libertarian president in their history and in Western history, Javier Milei. He's quite a eccentric, interesting fellow. Beast, hello. Thank you for joining us. And now my party, the Labour Party, have gone and had a hoot. Interesting. Yeah, let me see. Oh, I caught up to the chat. What is the meaning of Palestine? As far as I know, the name was given by Romans who wanted to humiliate the Jews, but what's the meaning? It's a derivative of Philistina, which was the land the Philistines, or the Sea Peoples, occupied in the 10th and 9th centuries, which were rivals to the ancient kingdom of Israelite, the Davidic kingdom. Yes, thank you, Big Knox. Yes, the Afghan-Soviet War, basically the Soviet Vietnam. Don't take this seriously, please, but the worst thing Hitler did was ruin the mustache. I mean, no one can ever again have it. That is a crime against humanity. Oh, I don't know if he ruined the mustache. His mustache was really, really bad. Look up Josef Pilsudski's mustache. That guy, you look at Johann Strauss. Look at some of the facial hair some of these guys carried around. The Clark Gable pencil mustache. There's some really cool ones out there, to be sure. But very few people wear mustaches anymore. I've noticed it's much more common to wear a goatee or a Van Dyke. Judaism is the only religion that openly hates Jesus Christ. Richard, that is not true. Please explain the difference between communism and socialism. So, Rodolfo, I would see communism as more of a political system focused on, although it was originally intended to be only an economic system, I would say that socialism, more often than not, is an economic system that is bent on nationalization, basically taking from the rich whatever assets and money is necessary to help the poor with certain things through the nationalization of and the loss of private industries and private property, which has been utilized by communists on multiple occasions. Whereas communism is the political system that means that creates a command economy where the economy is planned by the government, and also a political system where the government is run by the party, which usually becomes a dictatorship. Roy Lee, that's a bad idol. You need to find a new one. Robespierre, want a big Rousseau history question for fun? Has Crimea always been doomed by its geographical position? Yes. Robespierre, I would agree with you that it has. The Turks had it, the Russians had it, the Ukrainians have it, the Russians have it again, and if this war is going to end, the Russians will get it again. My prediction is that they will agree to a deal where the Russians get Crimea. The Crimeans voted to join Russia. I'm not crazy about Putin having more land and power, but I'm also not crazy about Ukrainians dying, and I know Volodymyr Zelensky isn't either. Harry, the Americans are anti-socialist because they confuse socialism with communism. And although socialism has been utilized by communist governments as an economic initiative, it is not always what the communists want. In fact, communism and socialism at first did not distinguish itself from one another. The distinguishment came in the 1920s. Excluding Russia, the British communism was just one type of socialism. That's how Marx saw it. And Marx thought that socialism would lead to full communism. Excluding Russia, the British Navy is the first or second-ranked navy of European countries. Steve, the British Navy has actually always been at the top. Can we call modern Scandinavian countries socialistic? Somewhat. They're definitely they believe in a highly socialized system where the government does provide certain benefits and services for the people without payment, but they rely on a heavy tax base. They have not nationalized all their industries, and they do not have, and they actually, a lot of them have opened up when it comes to free market, when it comes to business, entrepreneurship, and things like that. So they're not fully socialistic in that sense. Why did Trump just put tariffs on a small island off Australia when there's no humans there, just some penguins? They're all retaliatory, and they're all meant to serve a political point, Greg. And the political point is taken. Now I would like cheap goods again. People in the Levantine region are called Arabs, but they look different from the Arabs of Saudi Arabia. They have fair skin and Southern European. Why is that? Partly it's because of the climate and environment they live in that's closer to the sea, but also it's these are different types of tribes and Semitic peoples. I've seen videos of Jews spitting on Christians in Israel. Yes, that has happened sometimes. And if you think that that's bad, look at what the Christians did to the Jews in the Middle Ages. Should the NBA be 70 to 80% blacks? I think the NBA should be 90 to 100%, should be at least 99, if not 100%, people who are totally qualified and talented to be in it. And I don't care that the NBA isn't 70 to 80% black. Same way I don't care that hockey is 80 to 90% white. It doesn't matter to me. The truth of the matter is, if somebody is good at the sport, let them play and let them do a great job. And heck, I'm enjoying the playoffs so far, and I hope you are as well. My only hope is that the Lakers go down very soon. And let's see. I have to fill out a bracket, but I basically think that this could be Boston's year again. They may repeat for all I know. Boston, maybe Oklahoma City, but I don't believe in them. They're too young. What about the stock market, Roy? Well, actually, the stock market's recovering a little bit because Trump continues to tantalize people by teasing that he'll get rid of the tariffs. If he got rid of them tomorrow, the stock market would bounce to levels not seen before. He's wanting to make China pay, and there's a lot that China has done that obviously a lot of people would raise their eyebrow at. I don't know if this is the best way to do that. The hope is that they will not be able to last as long as the Americans are, but Donald Trump's approval is dropping faster than a rock. He has to come to some sort of agreement. Amazon just agreed to raise its prices. There's got to be some mitigation there. Tariffs do not historically work. They're more historically understandable at different periods. This is not one of them. We're in a global economy. Yeah. What's the difference between California and socialism? I've heard that joke before. California isn't a fully socialist society. It's not a one-party state. Oh, wait, it is. Well, it doesn't have universal health. Oh, wait, it does. California isn't a socialist society. That's funny, though. A lot of people have made that joke. The People's Republic of California, I've heard. But socialism is not controlling companies from taking money from the rich. Well, yes, if you nationalize an industry and take over it, that is a socialistic platform. If you are providing all of the benefits to the people, be it healthcare or maternity leave, or you are controlling the industries of a society, so that everyone in the society will supposedly benefit from that. That is nationalization, and that is a form of socialism. We are marching ever closer to an oligarchy with Trump, Musk, and Trump. Well, I don't know if we were that far off of an oligarchy before. I wouldn't be surprised if that's true, and Musk's not going to be there much longer, hopefully. Do you predict recovery in the stock market? I am. Thank you so much, in no way affiliated. Love you too. It annoys me when conservatives say that Scandinavia has higher economic freedom than the U.S., but yes, it does, but it also has extraordinarily powerful trade unions to protect workers. Yes, but the economic freedom is there, and the U.S. trade workers and their unions have been pretty strong for a long time, so strong that they've been tied to organized crime for a long time. Catherine the Great had some funny ideas about claiming Pontic Greek civilization as part of Russian imperial identity in Crimea. Lots of cultural propaganda and ideas because of her ties, her ideas. Good stuff. Thank you so much. Yeah, the truth of the matter is that she was actually misled about how nice it was because of Gregory Potemkin, her lover, who basically, as a general, was able to build these small villages that were basically made life look wonderful, even though the people were starving to death in the Crimea. And those are where we get the phrases Potemkin villages. Do you see any systematic flaws in President Trump's approach to economics? I don't think tariffs work long term. I think that most economists of both left and right origin do not agree with tariffs. Tariffs are, as a temporary and negotiative measure, might be effective, but as an economic measure, they mean higher prices and higher problems. In your opinion, should Europe have stricter... Sorry, there's a plane. In your opinion, should Europe have stricter immigration policies? I don't know. I haven't read enough about it to say yes or no one way or another. I know any country in history, we argue about the need to take care of immigrants and refugees. Doing that in the past was never anyone's trouble. This is a modern humanitarian thing that I think a lot of people take upon themselves to make themselves feel better. The truth of the matter is that a lot of people don't care at all. In history, you can look back at different historical events, and people did not mind refugees at all, and did not see a need to take in immigrants from other countries. A country has borders because of its history and culture, and those borders deserve to be there and are there for a reason. People do not get to just come across those borders automatically. I think most people can agree with that. But that doesn't mean that somebody who has made a life for themselves in another country for years because of a broken system should just be exited from that system for almost no apparent reason. So I think that's a fair, moderate perspective that I think makes sense historically. Immigrants have built countries like the United States. Europe has a different history because Europe was not built by immigrants like the United States was. Yo-yo, a historical question. Who owns this land since ancient times? Does it belong to the Palestinians or Israel? And what is the Israelis' argument for claiming that this land belongs to them above? Well, yo-yo, the truth of the matter is the Israelis do have a longer track record in connection to that land. If you're going to believe that the Hebrews, the Davidic kingdom, and the ancient Jews are indeed the people of Israel today, and to a large extent they certainly are. But the truth of the matter is that does not mean that certain people, the United States once belonged to the Native Americans, and then the Native Americans lost their land. History has results and consequences. Things definitely change. Just because one country has a claim to it historically, that means they have a right to stay there and obviously have some sort of occupying presence. That doesn't necessarily mean, and I'm a historian so I can vouch for that country is only the only ones that can be there. So, have you heard of the Great Emu War? Yes, in Australia. Apparently, Australia declared war on its emus some time ago. Meritocracy has any disadvantages, or is the best way to organize society? I don't know if it has. I'm sure it has disadvantages, but it also is the best way to organize society. You don't get things perfect. Do I support Trump? I'm not making political cases. I have been plenty critical of President Trump. I've also been plenty critical of people who have been plenty critical of President Trump for wrong reasons. I'm a historian, talking about history and social studies, and I'll talk about it if I think it's relevant to history. What's your favorite war? Mine's Caesar's Civil War. That's a good one, Vibrata, definitely. Mine would be probably the Napoleonic Wars. Hello again, AI. What's your opinion on the origin of religions, and what does the world look like without them? Thanks. I think everybody has this notion that the world will be better off without religion. That's not going to happen. You can't have human society, culture, or civilization without the need to establish a series of beliefs and traditions, usually associated with how we should live and what will happen to us after we die. And obviously, religion is the biggest candidate to answer those questions, because everybody is afraid of death and wants to live a good life so their death is not painful somehow. And the truth of the matter is, I think religion is just an integral part of the human experience, and I think we've seen examples of plenty of secular societies that have been horrifyingly evil, and plenty of religious societies that have also been horrifyingly evil. So the idea that religion is necessarily a net bad is not true. I think religion is neutral and can be used for good or evil purposes depending on the people who are using it. Are they using it to help others? Are they using it for power? What's the matter? So, Harry, if nationalization in itself is socialist, then that means British conservatives are socialists and European conservatives, for the most part, would be socialists. I didn't say it was the only form. You've got redistribution of wealth. You've got confiscation. I don't like the argument that that having a fire department is socialist, for instance. I think that's a Jejune argument. I think you have to have several features across the board met at different times. Confiscation of wealth, redistribution of wealth, things like that. Are typically in nationalization, indeed, a mass nationalization, usually indicated by, there's other things that I'm blanking on at the moment, but those are some of the main indicators of a socialist society. Are you interested in the market? As somebody who has money in the market, I'm certainly interested in it. Horace, how should the Republican Party be compared to fascism when they support capitalism and fascists don't? Fascism is not capitalistic. I really disdain the idea that it was capitalistic. What was the only free market caveat was that Mussolini let the manufacturers in Italy do what they wanted, as long as they supported his ideologies and let the Italian government do what they wanted. So the truth of the matter is, I don't see fascism as capitalistic. it can be seen as right-wing. I don't see the Nazis as right-wing. It's hard to make the case that the National Socialist Workers' Party was a right-wing organization. There was definitely a lot of nationalization going on in Germany in the 1930s. That's how Goering was basically able to get rid of unemployment, by basically drafting everyone to work for the government, for businesses that were controlled by the government to produce certain factors. So the Republican Party gets compared to fascism because of the rhetoric of people like Donald Trump, who is often compared to a fascist as well, which I think is an insult to fascism. I mean, that is not a fascist. I mean, you could have so many better examples of actual fascists who promote fascist ideology. Let me see here. Is this channel corporate? No, it is not corporate, but hopefully it will be monetized soon. If you like and subscribe, we're getting on our way there. Go check out my videos, long form ones, Mondays and Fridays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and my short form content dropping every day. Henry Rice. I know, I've heard that argument before, that he faked the Butler incident. He certainly did not. And the Reichstag fire was not faked as well. And Trump did not use that to seize power. He wasn't even in power when he was shot. Let me see here. I mean, you never hear about United States trade unions bringing the country to a halt. You hear it all the time in Scandinavia if they have a company taking the mick or if they have a government. That's not true. The coal miners' strike in the early 1900s did that. There were many strikes throughout the 1900s and early 1910s. The Haymarkets riots, late 1800s, there are plenty of strikes in the United States that brought about a screeching halt. Trade unions have lost a lot of their power because they have been associated with more dubious characters and have lost a lot of their influence, and many people have turned their back on them, as America tends to be more conservative in those lands. So I completely understand the notion that they have stronger trade unions in Sweden and Scandinavia, but it did ever occur to you that they needed that because of how free their markets are? Something hard to find on the internet. Nevada tried to secede from the USA after the Civil War. Nevada was a slave-free state. Slave-free state? Huh? I don't know what you mean. Switzerland is a social country, but also capitalist. They believe in helping you live a certain quality of life. Yes, there's definitely a balance to be found there in Switzerland and in many of the European countries that has place to be criticized, but is not necessarily socialist and not necessarily capitalist. It's more of a halfway mark. Why was JFK assassinated? Depends on who you ask. A lot of people today, like his nephew, are saying that he was assassinated because he refused to escalate U.S. involvement in Vietnam, and the CIA did not trust him after the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Bay of Pigs. Where are you from? I'm from the United States. I don't get into much more detail after that. We've gone over an hour, by the way, folks, so I appreciate everyone staying in. If you like history and social studies, consider liking and subscribing. I will try my best to catch up to the chat in the next few minutes, but we are wrapping up very soon. The Huguenots make for an interesting case from refugees in Europe. Yes, many of them went to North and South Carolina. Admiral, that's a secret. You're not supposed to tell everybody that I'm a crackhead. And yes, religion is much different than race. Paul, you don't have to scream all of your answers into the chat. Why is that leftist Jews are pro-Palestine and anti-war, like, for example, George Soros? Some leftist Jews are. Some liberal Jews, many Jews in the United States vote Democratic and are more liberal than a lot of other people in the U.S., but they tend to support Israel. You can support Israel without supporting its government. At what point are you a historian instead of just someone who likes history and studies history? That's a great question, Harry. I really like that question. I think it's when you I think anyone who studies history to some extent, one way or another, is a historian. So that's why I say if you like and subscribe, you're a friendly neighborhood historian. Because it's that easy. I wondered when I first started this channel if I should be the friendly neighborhood historian. But then I realized that everybody who participates in the historic process, in discussing history with me and learning about history with me, is a historian. So that's why I call you guys the historians. I am more technically, when you decide to pursue it as a career, when you decide through research to become a professor, teacher, writer in that field, you can be that's what makes you a historian. But I technically believe that everyone who studies and loves history is a historian. So hopefully you guys are liking what we're doing here and considering becoming historians yourself. Like and subscribe to become one. Let me see here. Stephen, Trump is making history by giving power back to the people. I have heard that a lot. I need to see more evidence of it happening. Hars, just like how the Democratic Party used to support slavery, do you agree parties can change in their ideology and views based on the time? Yes. 10 years ago, Republicans never could have gotten away with advocating for tariffs, and now they do. Tariffs were always seen as anti-free market, and the Republicans were the free market party. Bella, good to see you. Hubert Hoover once promised a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. What do you think Trump might offer? A big, beautiful wall like he's offered the last 10 years. According to most Americans, the U.S. government is the greatest on earth. China is the worst. The U.S., you have two choices. In China, they have one. What a massive difference. And in Britain, you have two as well. Are most people in Russia churchy since the fall of the Soviet Union? Ostensibly, yes, but I've been reading and learning recently that Russia is not nearly as religious as you might think. Although the Russian Orthodox Church holds a high traditional appeal, obviously, and is a huge cultural emblem, and there are many millions of Russian Orthodox Christians who suffered under the Soviet Union and endured under the Soviet Union, church attendance in Russia is extremely low. And I do not trust the official numbers from the Russian government. I've heard and read stories that from testimonies from Orthodox Christians, which Eastern Orthodox Christianity is the biggest Christian sect in Russia, that's proclaim and show proof and evidence that church attendance was very low. Russia has the second largest number of abortions relative to the rest of the world except for China. And the truth of the matter is that is something that is not usually congruous with a more religious society or a theocratic one. Putin getting the blessing of the Russian patriarch to invade Ukraine was mainly show. I don't believe Putin is a communist through and through. There's a church, you could say they are churchy, but certainly not religious. Richard, am I Jewish? No, I am not, but I appreciate the compliment that you think I am. Jew is a religion, not a human race. Judaism is the religion. Jews are the race. Bruno, what were the first civilizations on Earth? Were they more advanced than given credit for? Yes and yes. Bruno, the first civilizations, there is the Indus River Valley civilization in modern-day Pakistan, which are the forebearers of the Indian subcontinent. I forget their name. Was it Shang or Shang? They were the earliest Chinese civilizations that would later become the Xia dynasty. Watch my series on the Chinese emperor, on the Chinese imperial dynasties to learn more about that. I did intend to get a video out on my Russian history series that I'm doing on my shorts. I wasn't able to do that because I got sick, but I will be having that out early this next week. And obviously Egypt and Mesopotamia. The earliest one that we have records for are the Sumerians, ancient Mesopotamian series of city-states that relied on the Tigris and Euphrates River to provide their food. I don't think capitalism is fascist, but on the other hand, socialist and communist countries who happen to become fascist like Russia, China, and North Korea. Yes, to be fair, fascism is a derivative of socialism and communism, or at least communism, because it's more political than it is economic, which is ironic because, again, Marx never intended communism to be a political system. What was the John Birch Society? Were they influential? The far-right, extreme-right wing organization in the 1950s and 60s, basically hell-bent on protecting the United States from communism, also feeling that communism had basically invaded every single segment of American life. They made Joseph McCarthy look like Nikita Khrushchev. Harry, Hitler and Mussolini would be turning in their graves if you called the modern-day Republican Party fascist. Yes, I agree with you there. You got... Okay. Do you agree with my worst presidents list? 1, Woodrow Wilson. 2, Andrew Johnson. 3, LBJ. 4, James Buchanan. 5, Joe Biden. I like not to rank modern presidents because everybody will get political if I rank modern presidents. That's one of the reasons I haven't done a presidential tier list, though I must do it very soon. I'd say Buchanan's the worst U.S. president because he caused the Civil War and did nothing to stop it. I'd say Andrew Johnson's a close second. I think Biden, I'm going to give Biden a pass for those who want me to criticize him. He definitely has plenty to be criticized over, but he also has things to be praised for, and the truth of the matter is he just left the office a few months ago, so time will tell. I think Jimmy Carter is definitely somewhere near that list. I think the idea that Jimmy Carter is underrated is a historical hot take that I'm not one to take seriously anytime soon. I think Herbert Hoover needs to be on that list if we're being fair to and giving the Republicans their day in the sun. And I also think that Richard Nixon still needs to be considered because of Watergate. But I would say Woodrow Wilson, I don't know about LBJ being one of the worst. He's definitely highly overrated. And he's usually considered a good but not great president. I think he's bad but not near the bottom. Yeah, we were actually pretty economically prosperous at the time, so I think Johnson gets a pass for that. Thinking about presidents that I don't really think are that good. Again, I think Hoover should be on that list. Warren Harding probably should make that list. Benjamin Harrison. I'm not sure. It'd be hard to organize a top 5, but I don't agree with you fully. Woodrow Wilson, I don't think should be on that list either. I think he's highly overrated. I don't think he's a top 10 or top 15 U.S. president, but he's not one of the 5 worst ones. Harry, well, no, it's because of their trade unions being so powerful that they can have such a free market. I don't know if that's the case. You can have a free market without having trade unions. Were 95% of the Bolsheviks Jews? Richard, yes, a disproportionate amount of Bolsheviks were Jews, which has been acknowledged by many Jews throughout history. That's like, yes, that's amazing. Yes, and did you know that the vast majority of Nazis were German? Does that mean that Germans are necessarily bad? There were many Jews in Russia. They were some of the most educated and intellectual people, and that was one of the biggest types of intellectual It was called the intelligentsia running through the society at the time. Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate that. Otter, great to see you. Thank you so much. Let me see. Greg, I think Adolf Trump has roughed too many feathers. Everyone is seeing that they don't need America. That might be true to some extent, although I don't think that Adolf Trump really fits. Michael, a lot of people in history were gay. That's what you have in common. Oh, hilarious. Ha ha. People in history were gay, and I'm a historian, so I must be gay. Great. I'm just an incredible sleuthing on your part. Sherlock Holmes would be jealous. Some people in history were gay. I think it's a trend to find someone and consider them to be gay. Let me see here. Harry said, I thought it would be a PhD, which would give the official title of historian, but I suppose that would just make you a doctor of history, wouldn't it? Yes, you are considered by all fields to be a historian at that point, but I think someone who's working on their bachelor's in history is an official historian at that point. Andrew Johnson was a terrible president, Zhang Wei. James K. Polk is extremely underrated. I agree with you there. Have you listened to Barcode? My favorite time in history is the medieval ages. Barcode. I love Barcode. I love their cover of We Didn't Start the Fire. Why did Putin not go to the Pope's funeral? Because he hates the West. He hates Catholicism. He hates anything of the West. I'm actually kind of surprised Trump was there. Well, we have 4 conservatives, Liberal, Labor, Democrats, and now Reform. Yeah, who's going to be the top 2? Who's going to form? You guys are going to be getting very close to a coalition government, and the Liberal Party has lost much of its power. That's partially true, Harsh, but it wasn't to expand slavery. He didn't care if he expanded slavery or not. Polk added a ton of territory to the USA. That's true. Yes, Richard, I know that they did. It wasn't because they were Jews. It was because they were Bolsheviks. You could get a Muslim. You could get a Muslim Jew. Yeah, you could get a Christian Jew. They're called Messianic Jews. Let me see here. Bella, Ronald Reagan's slogan used to be, "It's morning again, America." What time of day is it now? Early afternoon. Joseph McCarthy wasn't per se wrong, just a bit cavalier. He was very, very over the top, to be sure. Wouldn't it be good for the world to diversify our source of manufacturing instead of solely dependent on China for manufactured product? Do you think Trump tariff on China do that? I think it could. I think it could. Can you go over to people on, I think having it in different sources of the world would be good. And that's what we did have. And let's see, Trump's trying to get back to the United States, and that's why the tariffs, but that's a slow process. Can you go over to people on here, the ongoing conflict between India and Pakistan, how it started? Are the same issues present? Yeah, Otter, I actually talked about it before you dropped in. I'm so glad to see you, though. It's always so great to have you on the channel. But yeah, basically, India, Pakistan have a long history. They were divided by the British because the former people who jointly occupied Hindustan could not be trusted because of their religious differences, and Kashmir is the land that separates the two of them, with the Indians believing it belongs to them and the Pakistanis believing it belongs to them, and the Indians being extremely nationalistic and the Pakistanis being extremely radical. It doesn't seem like it's going to go well. Hello? I hope the Americans aren't doomed. I hope you're wrong about that. Danny, where does Trump fall on your list? I can't judge a president who's been in office, just like I can't judge a president who's just been in office. It would be hard for me to put Obama on the list, to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't know why Jimmy Carter is so overrated. Oh, thank you so much, Robespierre. I would love to talk about them, and I'd love to talk art history with them. I love art. I just did a video about Jean Delacroix, whose birthday is today. I do a Today in History, Born Today, and Die Today videos on my channel every day, so check those out. And Harry, the Emperor Norton video is coming on Monday. I mean, Jimmy Carter wasn't a good president, but look at his post. Yes, that's the thing. He has a great post-presidency. That doesn't change what happened during those 4 years. Herbert Hoover had a great pre-presidency. He saved more lives than any other American president, and yet people still hate him. That was funny. 33. Woodrow Wilson basically had the Fed power. Yes, he created the Fed. Yes, that's true, Harry. The presidency was the worst part of his career. Yes, I've heard that. Tanuki. How can you have a free market without trade unions? You can have a free market without trade unions because they had them in the United States and in Great Britain in the early 19th century. You can have a market where people basically almost laissez-faire, but not quite laissez-faire. I don't think laissez-faire capitalism, like real socialism, has ever, or real communism, I should say, has ever really existed, where you have complete abandonment of any market controls whatsoever. But basically, there were not major trade unions in the United States until the late 19th century. The British had it later too. Yes, they were. I wouldn't say they are. What do you think Russia will do to fix its low birth rate? Do you think they would allow more immigrants in their country? No, they certainly won't allow more immigrants. They don't care about their birth rates, and the mass abortions are not helping either. It's actually interesting. Happy Saturday. Great to see you. Yep, made it, and now I'm back. Yes, I look like a Russian secret agent. People tell me I look like all sorts of different things, so I'll take that as a compliment. Most of those agents are very handsome. Why did U.S. back France and Vietnam? Didn't it backfire in the long run? They wanted to stop communism. That was the same thing they did in Africa. While the Liberal Democrats were in power, yeah, that's true, but again, the two major parties are the two major parties. You've got four choices, which are double the two of the U.S., but they're really two in facto. Did Putin kick de facto? Did Putin kick out most of the Russian oligarchs out of Russia? The Jewish oligarchs out of Russia? I think he did. I'm not sure. Do you think Puerto Rico will ever gain statehood? We have been a colony of the United States since 1898. I think it will. Probably in my lifetime. Yes, Zhang Wei, that's absolutely true. He doesn't care about Jewish, Christian. He's a communist to some extent, and most communists do not care about religion. He's also a nationalist, and nationalists use religion all the time. I was a great fan of Eugene Debs. Is his resilience to the First World War regarded fairly? No, not at all. He was put in jail by President Wilson. It was President Harding who freed him. Polk's gains caused disaster later. Wilson set race relations back 50 years later and wrecked world peace. LBJ wrecked the economy, escalated Vietnam, and divided. Yes, I've heard the complaints, and I think some of those complaints are valid, but believe me, America's had even worse. Odessa is not. So let's see here. I think I'm finally caught up to the chat. Salvage. Palestine has a right to statehood. Yeah, I don't disagree. What was America's involvement in Africa to stop communism? Patrice Lumumba in the Congo. Nkrumah in Ghana. Julius Nyerere, I believe. They did a lot to stop communist organizations in Africa and in South and Central America, basically at the cost to the people there who had elected those governments or at least wanted them in power. Yes, that's true. I do agree with you, Harry, that paid leave is definitely an issue Americans struggle with. Why do you genuinely not think Woodrow Wilson was the worst president? Give me reasons. He won World War I. He set up an organization that would eventually become the UN, although the original form didn't work. America was pretty proud and prosperous during his time. America wasn't in total crisis, and he didn't ruin it. He didn't do a lot of... He was short-sighted, I think, but he wasn't terrible. What would happen to a country whose older population far exceeds their younger population? Would that country just taken over by some other group of people? Yes, to some extent. And that's happening all over the world. There's a natal crisis on our hands. The world is not about to be overpopulated, it's about to be underpopulated. That's very true, Shurkin, very true. All right, so I'm at 77 minutes. I've gone 17 minutes over schedule, but I really appreciate everybody joining me and asking all these great questions. If you don't have any more questions, I'm going to sign off, and I hope you all have a wonderful Saturday evening. I'm going to pass on doing a second hour, and we will just go tomorrow, maybe do 2 hours. I'm going to do a live stream lecture. Hars, remind me, what was my topic for the live stream lecture? Did we pick one? Yes, Zhang, that's exactly it. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. You need unions to have a free market, otherwise you just get abusive workers like the U.S. Yes, but the market was free. It's not. Maybe I'm arguing a technicality, but that's not my point. But thank you, Harry, for your contributions as always. Did you say African leaders meddled in other nations? No, I said the United States meddled in African nations. I don't know if we had a topic for tomorrow's live stream lecture. Maybe I'll have to think of one. But anyways, I hope to see you all there, 4 p.m. Eastern, and I will do another hour of Q&A after that, I think. I don't know my schedule, but we will see how everything takes off. Hope you all have a great and enjoyable Saturday evening or early Sunday morning for those of you joining us from across the world, as we have so many wonderful people here who join the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Make sure you liked and subscribed before you headed out. And I will take care. This is History Hefner signing off, saying... take care, and remember, love history. Bye-bye now.